Good morning and good afternoon to all of you joining us from around the world. Welcome to the most important lever contact centers aren't pulling. My name is Scott Rothman and I'm a director with our Effortless Experience program here at Challenger. World-class coaching is a topic that we're truly passionate about here at Challenger. We found in research study after research study that coaching is a critical tool for staff development, yet we've also found that coaching is not very effective at most organizations. Now, we've got a lot to cover. What I'm going to ask is, while you're going through this, write down any questions you have. I'm going to be sharing my email at the end, so you can send those questions in and we can continue the dialogue. Now, to set our expectations for our time together, we're going to spend the bulk of our time discussing what it means to practice world-class coaching and reviewing a few insights from our coaching benchmark data set. These insights are specific to the customer service and support world, and we're examining the best practices of your frontline leaders. In other words, how should your supervisors be coaching your frontline reps or agents? Does that sound okay? Hopefully everyone's in the right session. I'd actually like to start with a brief discussion on organizational change, because it's important to understand the broader business context that's influencing much of how we manage our customer service and support organizations today. Research shows that most executives believe the pace of change will never be slower than it is today. Let me say that again. The pace of change will never be slower than it is today. And we aren't talking small changes, right? Take a look at the left-hand side of the page. These are major disruptive change events. Things like restructuring, market expansions, mergers and acquisitions. And these were just the things that organizations had taken on in the 3 years prior to the research. Now, keep in mind, this was the feeling before COVID-19, and while a pandemic might be on here moving forward, I think a key point to recognize is that only 13% of survey respondents indicated that there would be fewer changes across the following 3 years, which you can see over on the right-hand side of the page. So how well do these changes go? After all, we need to get good at change and get good fast if the pace is only going to pick up from here. As you can see across the top half of the page, or I should say top of the page, half of all changes are clear failures, while only 34% are reported as clear successes. Think about that for a second. Half of all changes are clear failures, not mixed results, not kind of successful, and not we could have done better, clear failures. But now that we know change is so common, shouldn't we be used to this, and shouldn't we have more success than failures? If you take a look at the bottom half of the page, here's some explanation for why we fail so often to successfully change. Employees self-report that they are not effectively changing, nor are they quick to change. Take a look at the bottom left-hand side of the page. Only 26% of employees say that they are effectively changing how they work when the organization goes through a major change. Furthermore, over on the right-hand side, only 17% agree that they're changing their behaviors. Based on our experience in working with customer service organizations around the world, this primarily comes down to how the organization supports the change. Specifically, we find that many organizations will undertake a massive change initiative without pausing to consider how this is going to play out across the lower levels of their org charts, specifically supervisors and frontline reps. Let me bring this a little closer to home to illustrate how this plays out the service and support function. Just as companies more broadly are enduring rapid change, so too are we in the customer service organization. What used to be a productivity-focused function over there in arrow 1 on the left-hand side of the page has shifted over the last 15 years or so. We used to operate in a world where we had an even mix of easy and complex issues, where customers have fairly simple expectations. Enter the digital age of widespread self-service, and you'll see the shift that happened as you look to era 2 in the middle of the page. Not surprisingly, the average contact's complexity has shifted as all the easy issues are going the way of self-service. What that means is that our staff's jobs are getting harder and more demanding. They have to be ready to solve more difficult problems for more difficult customers. Customers have never been more savvy than they are today. Check out Era 3's customer expectations on the far right-hand side. They're more knowledgeable, or at least they think they are, about their issues and have much higher expectations of how you're going to solve them. We can thank Amazon or Zappos for that, or Apple. Most of you on the phone today can probably identify pretty well with Era 2 or Era 3. This is not your early 2000s call center anymore. And here's the tie-in for today's topic on coaching. What's the impact that these changes have had across our supervisor population? A little foreshadowing. Most organizations are hiring supervisors the same way they did 20 years ago. In a nutshell, they're promoting their high-performing reps into leadership roles they're not ready to handle. But this approach wasn't always as dangerous as it is today. Let's explore why on the next page. Take a look at the top half of this page. This is our old world, back when we were focused on standardized service and rep adherence to script and policy, and we managed to it like nobody's business. In the top middle, you can see that this played out with rigid QA checklists and metrics like our old friend AHT. For our supervisors in the top right, this was a pretty straightforward management job. But take a look across the bottom. The new world where we are today, we're asking our reps to provide more tailored service that feels low effort to the customer, frequently by using their own judgment. In this world, we're measuring to customer-focused outcomes, not business-driven metrics. It suddenly becomes not so black and white, and a whole lot more gray. And our supervisors are now left wondering how to coach to the behavior-based environments we're trying to create. So as I mentioned, organizations are not exactly preparing their supervisors for this new world. Many service leaders we speak with will readily admit that there isn't a cohesive coaching philosophy at their organizations, and they kind of just leave it up to each individual supervisor to develop their own style. You'll probably agree that when I say that type of approach can be really dangerous. Suddenly you have 50 different styles of coaching happening, driving extremely inconsistent results across your organization. So let's dig into coaching. First, by establishing what exactly that word means. One of the more interesting things we've learned as we've conducted this research is that coaching means many things to many people. In some cases, being coached is the equivalent of being put on a performance plan. It's something that only happens when you do something wrong. And in other cases, it involves classroom training or e-learning modules. Through our research, we've established a solid foundation for what effective coaching means, and we'll use this definition as a foundation for today's session. So let's take a moment to get familiar with it. Coaching is an ongoing and dynamic series of job-embedded interactions between a supervisor and frontline staff designed to diagnose and correct or reinforce behaviors specific to that individual. Few key callouts here, right? Ongoing, dynamic, job-embedded, diagnose, behaviors. One phrase that isn't in bold, but I think is just as important to mention, is the very end, specific to that individual. I'm calling this out because I want to be very clear that coaching doesn't have to be, in fact, it shouldn't be uniform in order to be consistent. Absolutely, it's important to have a consistent perspective on what coaching is and how we do it, but each coaching interaction should be very tailored to an individual and their specific development needs. To get a little more comfortable with this definition, let's take a look at the next page and for some additional comparison to what coaching is and what it isn't. You'll see we've got a few comparisons on the page. I'll run through them fairly quickly to help set the tone for the rest of our conversation. Over there on the top left, coaching is not assessing past performance with an individual, but it is focusing on improvement moving forward. It's not delivered once or twice a year, it's ongoing. It's not manager-led, but rather an exercise involving coach and coachee. We both talk. And it's not the lesson of the day or the lesson of the week, generic content. It's instead highly tailored to an individual's needs. Again, consistency is not the same as uniformity. Finally, Coaching is not just me telling you what worked when I had your job. That's mentoring. It is instead me helping you discover how you'll improve in a way that is authentic to you. Okay, now that we have a clear understanding of what coaching is, let's talk about why coaching is important. Why is it imperative that we get this right? Over the past several years, coaching has really become an incredibly important tool for the entire company, as it's been proven time and time again to lead to effective outcomes in the business world. And the service and support organization is absolutely no exception. Coaching is a leading performance driver, as the title of the page says, or suggests, I should say. In fact, as we look at the data here, coaching is the most effective performance lever in the contact center. Literally the best thing organizations can do to improve the customer experience being provided by the front line. It's more impactful than simply focusing on retaining staff, far more impactful than recruiting high performers, and significantly more impactful than training staff. At first blush, it might seem a bit counterintuitive that training can actually diminish frontline performance. You'll see our note over there. It's not that all training is bad. I mean, here at Challenger, we're in the training business, so we certainly believe in its value. The key here is that when organizations over-rely on training as the only way to develop staff, that's where you start to see the negative impact. I'm talking about things like a refresher training or something along those lines. To dig into coaching versus training a little bit more, you'll see our thoughts on the bottom of the page. Coaching trumps training for a few reasons. First, it's likely much closer to the event being coached, whereas training can feel removed from the day-to-day. Second, coaching, when done well, allows the coaching to self-discover their improvement opportunities, whereas training is much more about telling or one-way information delivery. If this data here on the page hasn't convinced you yet on the value of coaching, let's take a look at the next page, which relates to the impact of coaching on frontline staff retention. What you see here is a stack rank list of what drives frontline retention in order of greatest to least magnitude, or I should say greatest to least magnitude. Job opportunity, meaning the opportunities to grow in the company and increase one's knowledge and responsibilities, is the best driver of retention. Staff motivation, meaning the degree to which staff work in a motivated environment where peers work hard and aspire to career advancement. Somewhat less important, but still plays an important role. Coaching effectiveness comes in at a very close third place. So yet additional data that coaching really does matter. And coaching effectiveness is interestingly more impactful than is pay relative to market rate. Now, I want to be clear here. What we mean by this is that assuming that frontline staff pay is competitive with the pay offered by other companies in the area, staff will sooner leave a company if coaching and development is poor than if salaries do not increase. So coaching is an extremely effective development and retention tool, and all the data points to the importance of effective coaching. The problem is many organizations find that coaching doesn't always yield the best outcomes. In fact, in some cases, it can cause more harm than good. So let's talk about the risks of poor coaching, and then we'll spend some time sharing the building blocks of effective coaching. I talked about our research in this space. We've researched coaching extensively, and what we find time and time again is that unless staff receive effective coaching, staff might as well not receive any coaching at all. This is a strong statement, but as you look at the data on this page, you'll understand why we believe that. Take a look at the chart on the left-hand side. This compares the impact of good coaching and poor coaching, and as you can readily see, poor coaching harms performance almost twice as much as good coaching helps performance. Quite literally, it is better to not coach at all than to do it poorly. And this is largely due to what you see on the right-hand side of the page. Poor coaching causes major issues like frontline staff disengagement, unproductive development. Hopefully, at this point, you're asking yourself, or I should say the question that you're asking yourself, the questions are, okay, so how can we get better? What actually drives good coaching? We'll answer those questions as we move through the remainder of the presentation. As a starting point, though, I want to first review a few common wrong answers. Common misperceptions or misconceptions, I should say, about what's needed to be more effective at coaching. We find that when service and support groups set out to improve the quality of coaching their reps received, there are three common misperceptions about what it's going to take to get better. Let me give you a quick overview. First and foremost, is myth number one: more time. The common thought is that if I just had more time to coach, I'd get better results. I mean, we hear it all the time from supervisors. I don't have enough time. But as we'll show you in a moment, effective coaching can actually be very efficient. Effective coaching is a matter of quality, not quantity. In the center of the page, we have myth number two: more structure. The typical thought is effective coaching happens only off the floor in a distraction-free environment. As we all know, that protected time is hard to come by. But as we'll discuss, the most effective form of coaching is actually more informal and less rigid. And finally, on the far right, myth number three: more attention. The thought here is that any attention to staff development is good attention. Well, as it turns out, not always the case. If coaches haven't properly prepared and don't have the right style and right tone, coaching can come across as punitive. So let's dig a little bit more. Let's dig into more detail, and then we'll talk more about the best-in-class coaching and what it should look like. I want to spend just a couple seconds more here on these three myths. As the data here suggests, coaching effectiveness does not stem from creating more time. What we found is that freeing up time for coaching does not improve team performance. Take a look at the data. This is the difference in coaching hours per team per month as between high-performing teams and all other teams. And you'll notice the difference. It's almost no difference at all. More coaching time is not the answer. In fact, if you come with me to the next page, you see that we have listed the drivers of effective coaching. As you look at the two bars here, you can see that we've categorized the drivers of coaching impact into two types: delivery drivers on the left and time-focused drivers there in the middle. I guess those are three bars, so we'll focus on the left and the ones in the middle. Interestingly enough, only 3% of drivers fall into the time bucket. What the data here suggests is 97% of coaching effectiveness stems from the delivery of coaching, not the time spent. So again, quality, not quantity. All right, myth two: more structure. The common perception is that coaching requires more structure. But what we found is that there are actually two different formats of coaching, and interestingly enough, the less formal format leads to far more effective coaching. Let me give you a quick overview of the two different coaching formats, and then we're going to dig into quite a bit around how effective they are and how they can work together. On the top left of the page is integrated coaching. This is all about creating real-time, on-the-job learning opportunities out of everyday scenarios on a regular basis. And on the top right is scheduled coaching. It's exactly what it sounds like: planned time for our one-on-one meetings that occur on a regular basis, typically away from the floor. We'll talk shortly a little bit more about the ideal mix of these two formats, but the reason we advise that integrated coaching is used as the primary format is because of the data that you now see coming onto the screen. What we find is that using integrated coaching for the majority of coaching can lead to a 12.2% increase in frontline staff performance. In contrast, over-relying on scheduled coaching can actually decrease frontline staff quality and productivity scores by 5.1%. Now, this isn't to say that all scheduled coaching is bad. Indeed, it can be very important, but too much scheduled coaching can be harmful, similar to how the over-reliance on training can be harmful. Let's explore that in a little more detail. Why do you think scheduled coaching can hurt performance? You'll see that we've got three explanations on why scheduled coaching is often not effective. First, over on the far left, scheduled coaching hinges on freeing up time. As we all know, it's It's just hard to always find the time to sit down for an hour and have a formal coaching session. So these sessions don't always happen with the regularity that they should. For example, when the queues get busy, scheduled coaching is almost always the first thing to get canceled. If we're always canceling, it means we're never coaching. If scheduled sessions are the only way we're coaching. Next, over in the middle, scheduled coaching happens away from the experience. The time lag that often happens between a development opportunity and coaching session can be huge. And so the coaching conversation can be less resonant for that staff person. It's not reasonable to have a great coaching conversation about a single service interaction that happened 3 days ago or several hundred interactions ago. Lastly, over on the far right, scheduled coaching often has a punitive reputation. Every time we go to a conference room or office for a coaching session with closed doors, it can seem to staff that they're in trouble. You've heard me say a few times now that not all scheduled coaching is bad, right? So what exactly is the right balance between integrated and scheduled coaching? Let's turn the page. Let's talk a little bit more about that. As you can see on the left-hand side of the page, integrated coaching is what the highest performing supervisors live and breathe. In fact, 76% of their total coaching activity is spent on this kind of coaching. Only 24% is spent on traditional scheduled coaching sessions. Compare that to our most current benchmarks, bar on the right-hand side. Typical supervisors spend only 39% of their coaching activity on integrated coaching and 61% on scheduled coaching sessions. Just a quick side note about the data on the right-hand side. This comes from our ongoing data collection about supervisor effectiveness, specifically as part of our Coaching Capabilities Builder program. What we do is we survey frontline staff for every participating supervisor to assess perceived coaching effectiveness, as well as overall coaching culture at the organization. And we update these benchmarks every couple of years, stay current. This data represents 74 cohorts of supervisors and responses from 10,152 frontline staff members from the last couple of years. So once again, it's important to reiterate that not all scheduled coaching is bad. In fact, it plays an incredibly important part in any best practice coaching habit. So let's talk a little bit about how these two coaching formats work together. This page starts to give us an answer to the question about what effective coaching actually looks like. We've established it isn't about time, but how you spend that time. And we know that the best supervisors are disproportionately spending their time in integrated coaching. Here's how the two coaching formats can work together to form a cohesive system. We'll start with the scheduled coaching over on the right-hand side of the page. Because 76-24 doesn't really roll off the tongue, you'll see we simplified our recommendation to 75-25. So 25% of coaching time should be spent in scheduled coaching or on scheduled coaching. And the purpose of this coaching is a bit of level setting. It's about, one, agreeing on new development areas, and two, reconciling any conflicting messages that might occur on the floor during integrated coaching. It's really all about reaching a handshake on development goals. It's informal, but it's vitally important. And ideally, these sessions occur on a scheduled basis, typically once or twice a month. What happens after we've had that handshake to establish development goals is integrated coaching. In the ideal system, again, this should represent 75% of the coaching activity. And this is where the real meat and potatoes of development happens on a daily basis, where supervisors will correct or reinforce behaviors through open-ended questioning that leads to self-discovery. And to be clear, integrated coaching is not simply in-the-moment feedback. It's not just any opportunity to correct a behavior. Right? Many of you might know that as drive-by coaching. Integrated coaching is different because it exclusively focuses on the goals that were established in the scheduled coaching session. This is how the two form that system we're talking about in the middle of the page. These activities are iterative. They complement each other, create a system of expectation setting and actual teaching. So hopefully you're with me, hopefully you're getting excited. We have one more myth to address, myth 3, which is more attention. And let's explore that just a bit more here on the following page. We know from our research that the delivery of coaching is very important. If the delivery is not right, coaching can be perceived as punitive, not beneficial. And key to effective delivery is providing positive, constructive coaching. In fact, this is one of the first exercises we do as supervisors when teaching them this coaching model. How do you take critical feedback and make it constructive? This is important because, as you see, the impact of coaching styles on frontline performance is stark. Critical feedback can significantly harm performance. You can see the performance dips into the negative zone in a big way. Now, absolutely, some coaching conversations require tough love, but the takeaway here is that coaching should be delivered with the intent of upskilling or improving rep performance, and a positive and constructive tone are very important to delivering this kind of message. Here's a bit of an alarm bell, though. Reps report that 53% of coaching happens in a critical or neutral tone. Supervisors have the best of intentions, but they're out there on your floor right now degrading team performance by using the wrong tone. So now that we've discussed the common misperceptions that often lead to poor coaching, let's wrap up by discussing a new coaching framework that incorporates all these research-driven insights. This page pulls together the insights from our research into a best practice coaching framework. I'll walk us through it, and then we'll start to wrap things up. First, in the middle, we have our always present skill flexing to communication styles. And by the way, if you're really curious, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be running a how-to tutorial on flexing communication styles. So if you're interested, again, I'll have my email and phone number up at the end of the presentation. So feel free to shoot me a note, and we'll make sure to kind of talk through that a bit. But we're starting here with flexing the communication styles. This is simply recognizing that, if I'm managing a team, this is where a one size does not fit all. I've got a team of 15, I've got a team of 18, right? I've got underperformers, I've got average performers, I've got overperformers. The way I communicate, the way I coach is going to be different with each group, with each individual. There might be a couple of people who respond to, hey, it worked like this for me, so do it like that. That's fine, right? We get lucky there, but we still got 13, 16 other people that we've got to communicate and coach. Just above that, research and understand development opportunities. Just another way of saying root causing. So here, it's all about making sure supervisors understand root causing, how to really dig in and find the real reason behind your issues. As we move clockwise, setting expectations and explain observations and scheduled sessions. These are our one-on-one sessions, right, that we're having for 30 minutes every couple of weeks or an hour a month off the floor. And then it follows up with integrated coaching. So what we're seeing here is a shift from spreadsheet coaching to behaviors, to root causing. Right? Scheduled sessions, absolutely. The key is being prepared and asking a lot of self-discovery questions while flexing your communication styles. And then finally, integrated coaching. Remember, it's connected to the goals established in scheduled coaching. It's targeted and in the moment. This whole group or this whole framework works together as a system. Now, here's the thing. There's definitely a lot more than what we just walked through. We've really just scratched the surface, and I could go on and on and on, and I wish we had more time to dig deeper, but I do want to be respectful of your time today and ensure you get to your next session. That said, as I mentioned at the very beginning, if you've got questions, if you've been jotting down thoughts, ideas, whatever it may be, agreement, disagreement, send them my way. Give me a call or send them my way via email. And I'd be happy to get back on the phone with you and talk more and dive deeper if you'd like. So my phone number there, 571-357-3969. Email, super simple, scott.rothman@challengerinc.com. And of course, the link to the Effortless Experience program. Again, please send those questions my way. I'll be happy and look to schedule follow-up discussions with anyone who wants to continue the conversation. Thanks again for joining me. Have a great rest of your day at the summit.